How's it going? And welcome to episode 173 of On the Wire. Proud member, the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hastings can be followed at Hastings Kevin. We got a great show lined up for you. But before we get into all of that, Kevin, it's great to be back with you on a Saturday night. I don't think we've done a Saturday night recording all regular season. So this is cool. We got a lot of extra information to get to pile through as we get closer and closer to the Faab run, the 17th Faab run of the season. How you doing, man?
Doing well, Adam. As I told you as we started recording, I was actually a little upset with my Royals for scoring runs in the bottom of the eighth inning on Saturday here versus the
Yes,
White Sox
it's the
because
worst.
I was anxious to see who was going to get the ninth for Kansas City. It ended up being
Mm.
Chris Bubich. They had a 5-run lead, but with the acquisition of Hunter Harvey, and I had already been speculating on a couple of other closers for the Royals. Now he would be my number one spec. He did pitch the eighth inning and was the one that gave up a run to make it a save situation for the ninth. So we still don't know in Kansas City, although it does appear that they were planning on having MacArthur for the ninth inning. So Hunter Harvey may just be a setup guy here. Already diving in right here in the intro, Adam,
Yeah, I
and discussing our save specs.
got Well, man, it's like I've been listening to Rick and Jake over at In the Pen religiously over the last couple of weeks, just because the trade deadline comes, and that's where your most of your specs go, especially in like head to head leagues, especially in daily leagues where you can make a move really really quickly. But in your fabs, it's like everybody's gonna know obviously what happens leading up, and the trade deadline. We were talking about this is in the middle of the week this year. Like they specifically changed the rules about the trade deadline so that they could change the date, right? It used to always be the July 31st. Now it's whatever day the commissioner wants around the date of the 31st. So if they want to make it a Monday, if they want to make it a Thursday, whatever. I don't get the logic. I haven't read any logic that why they picked the 30th. It's a Tuesday in the middle of a series, any random series that's happening in the middle of the week. Like I would have preferred if they had just always made it like we changed this in our fantasy league. It's always a Sunday. Our trade deadline is always the Sunday night. So the week is over. The next week hasn't begun yet. You have a little bit more information. It's a lot cleaner of a trade. Like I just wish MLB had done that. It's also at like 6 o'clock Eastern, so it's like there are games happening at that
Right.
time. Like, why not just make the trade deadline midnight Eastern or like something where all the games are over by? I don't know. It was mini rant, I guess. But it'll be fun to see what happens and then you'll have like 4 days to figure it out before the Fab run after the deadline. So we got lots of time to think about it.
Yeah, and that's only 10 days away. We
Yeah,
are close.
we are very close. I mean, why isn't anything? Oh, I guess we had the Harvey trade. We talked about that prior, and I'm sure we'll bring it up again later on. But it's like I guess we've been spoiled in the last couple of years. I feel like more kind of bigger trades or trades have been happening leading up to the deadline, and we just haven't really seen that yet this year. And waiting to see that all these kind of come in at the last possible second. That is fun though. Don't get me wrong. Like when they all happen on deadline day, throughout the course of the afternoon, that's great. So I guess I'll look forward to that. Multiple live streams people will be doing on that Tuesday to follow along. Obviously, I'm sure Nick and Paul will be doing theirs again, and that's always fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And my guess is the asking price on pretty much anybody that's available is extremely high right now due to so many teams that seem to still be in the race.
Right.
And the perception is there's going to be more buyers than sellers. And that probably has something to do with there not being much movement yet, is the prices are probably higher than teams want to spend, and it'll be the teams that start deciding, okay, we'll give up what it takes, that's when we'll start seeing the moves.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Everybody always thinking that they're in the race until the very last second, and they all of a sudden they realize, oh no, we weren't actually contenders. All right, so let's get into this first. We'll get into our news and notes. Obviously, we talked about what we just mentioned, Hunter Harvey getting traded over to your Royals. You seem to think that there's a possibility he is the closer. We talked about it off air, that I don't personally think this will be the last reliever that the Royals collect. I mean, what are your overall thoughts on your Royals and what they're going to do with their bullpen before the trade deadline? If you listen to, like I mentioned, Rick and Jake over at In the Pen, they're basically came to the conclusion that the Royals have the only bullpen in which, if they were to trade for another closer, they would keep their closer job, or a really good bullpen arm could gain a closer job where they didn't have one prior. Uh, there's not a whole lot of those situations on contending teams, except for Kansas City. So, do you expect your Royals to make an additional move? And what are your overall thoughts on Harvey?
Well, so as we were talking off air, I was concerned about MacArthur's job prior to the All-Star break. He did get in a game and get a save over the weekend just prior to the break. That was good to see for those of us that are rostering James MacArthur. Uh, I thought I was of the same the same thought process as Rick and Jake. Only I thought that with Hunter Harvey. I brought it up a few weeks ago. I was specking on the Royals bullpen a little bit. I had a couple of Will Smith shares really cheap just in case. He'd started pitching better recently, but Hunter Harvey could be the best arm in that bullpen. We've known for a couple of seasons he's probably a better pitcher than Finnegan in Washington, and so he was already rostered in many places. He is available in a couple of main event leagues and quite a few 12-team online championships. So there's some availability out there, and I was hoping to see what the Royals were going to do on Saturday. It does appear now they had a 4-run lead when Harvey entered the game in the 8th inning, uh, and he did give up a run, and that made it a save situation. But then we didn't see MacArthur in the 9th either because the Royals scored runs in the bottom of the 8th, as we were talking a little in the intro there. I this to me leads me to believe that they probably were saving MacArthur for the 9th if necessary on Saturday. But I still don't know going forward. MacArthur's been up and down. He's looked great at times. At other times, he gives up 4 runs. I do believe it wasn't a save situation, but I think it was a tie game a couple of weeks back, if I'm remembering correctly. So it was a high leverage situation. It wasn't like he was in there with an 8-run lead in the 9th, and we see a lot of closers give up runs in that situation, it seems like. But I really don't know, Adam. I would spec on Hunter Harvey. I wouldn't spend a lot of money on him, but if he's available, I'd put a couple dollar bid in just in case. Because as the bullpen sits right now, I think here within a couple of weeks, he could be the guy getting the 9th inning in Kansas City.
Yeah, well, worth specking on, because a lot of these other specs that we're going to be specking on in the bullpen, especially as the trade deadline comes a little closer and passes, are not going to be on winning teams. And Kansas City is, sorry, they're scoring runs, but that means that they're also a winning team at the moment.
Right.
All right. Well, there are other quote trade or acquisitions that teams make at the deadline or right before the deadline that don't involve trades. In the San Francisco Giants are about to make probably their biggest quote trade of the season as they welcome Robbie Ray into their rotation, as he finished up his final rehab stint just the other day on Friday, I believe, up in Sacramento. he is set to debut next week. Nothing official, nothing announced yet, but everybody's kind of expecting that to be the case. What day next week is very much so up in the air. I am speculating that he will make his debut, why not, at home in San Francisco. And if he does, that'll be on Thursday with plenty of rest between his rehab stint and his first day on the job in San Francisco against the Road Rockies, or Rocky Road, as it will, after they just spent the last 6 of their games in Denver, which I know is your favorite time to attack the Rockies when their first day on the road after spending a whole bunch of time at home. Could there possibly be a better matchup for somebody like Robbie Ray coming back from Tommy John on his first day back at the job, making his season debut for his new team? What situations do you have to be on where you roster Robbie Ray, where you are either benching him or starting him this coming week?
Yeah, it depends on what we end up hearing before we have to have our lineups set on Monday. And the Giants do play a game on Monday. There is a handful of teams with an off day Monday, not many. We have a pretty full schedule
Mm-hmm.
this coming Monday. So most of our lineups are going to be set. Uh, that with the start probably coming at the earliest on Tuesday. I do see some spots have him Tuesday. Roster Resource has him Wednesday at the LA Dodgers. And this is what I hope happens, because if he does indeed pitch at the Dodgers on Wednesday, number one, I doubt it, because people are looking at him as a rest of season player, not as a streamer. But it could keep the prices down a little bit. People don't like to spend a lot of money on somebody that they're not using the first week, and a lot of players don't like to use pitchers coming back from injury, especially a long-term injury such
Mm-hmm.
as this. And then the fact that it's at the Dodgers, I mean, I think that makes it a pretty easy decision. I don't think many fantasy players are going to start Robbie Ray this week if they believe that his first game back, he's starting at the Dodgers. The other reason I hope that this is the way it plays out is because what that would lead to down the road for Robbie Ray. If he would pitch Wednesday at the Dodgers, that would mean that he got Oakland the following week. And it wouldn't be a two-step as we typically think for a guy pitching on Wednesday, getting a two-step the
Sure.
following week. But they have 2 days off. They have a 5-game week the following week. So we get Oakland. His two-step would come 3 weeks in his third week back at Washington and versus Detroit. So he would get Oakland, Washington, Detroit. Yes, Washington's been much better than they have been the past couple of seasons this year. Oakland hitting home runs, but none of these teams are teams we're scared of. And I really like that, because I wouldn't use him in that Dodgers start anyway. So this is kind of what I'm hoping for. I've also seen him, as you're suggesting, right? This was their big acquisition, knowing that, and then knowing he was going to miss all this time. Why wouldn't they, regardless of opponent? Why wouldn't they run him out
At
there
home.
for his first appearance of the season at
Yeah.
home? Exactly.
And why in
So
LA? Yeah, exactly.
I I doubt we're going to know by Fab time Sunday night. And we may not know by the time we have to make our lineup decisions on Monday. But the bottom line is, yeah, the Giants are getting Robbie Ray. The schedule going forward after this week, even if it's not, that's night and day. Getting Rockies on the road in San Francisco, or going
It's
to the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? You can't get much of a bigger swing than that for the two choices we have of where he'll pitch this week. And we may have to just hope we're lucky when we're setting our lineups on Monday, because I kind of doubt we'll know yet.
Yeah, you're right. If it's funny because if he does start at home in Colorado, which I just think makes the most sense, he'll miss the Oakland series and then he'll have to pitch in Cincinnati.
Right.
And so
Such a huge difference here.
Yeah, either one, either way, he either starts off. I just still think like you give him that home start. Yeah, all right, fine. You want to throw him into the fray of Giants Dodgers rivalry? All right, I maybe, but I still think you give the man a home start. Let him put on that home jersey before putting on the road jersey. If you can make it work with the rest of your rotation. All right, let's get out of rotations. We'll move back into bullpens again. As I feel like I brought this up like every week for the last 3 weeks. But now it's official. The Toronto Blue Jays have both Eric Swanson and Yimi Garcia back in their bullpen, both activated from their rehab stints. Chad Green is still there as well in this bullpen. I'm wondering if they wanted to just get Swanson and Garcia back with enough time to showcase them prior to the deadline. There's a possibility all three of these guys are gone off this team by the deadline, and then we're speculating God knows who to take over the role in Toronto, as Romano may not pitch at all the rest of this season. And if he does, it won't be until like the very end of September. Um, I mean, are you doing anything with this bullpen? Do you see any of these guys being able to get moved into a situation where they could move into a closer position, or do you see Swanson being the odd man out and sticking around in Toronto and then possibly taking the role for the last 2 months of the season? Do you have any takes here in Toronto?
Well, I think just because of cost, if I'm speculating on the Toronto situation where I don't already roster one of these relievers, I think Swanson is the spec move. It would be inexpensive still at this point because Chad Green is still there and Jimmy Garcia was amazing. I'm of the belief he's probably getting this job back. So if he's available, yeah, I'm putting bids on him, but I'm not bidding a lot of money because I agree with you. At least Chad Green and Jimmy Garcia are probably being moved. Swanson could be moved as well, but just coming off injury, I think he would be the guy that would stay behind. And so he's the guy that I would spec on if I don't already roster a Blue Jay reliever. But yeah, kind of what you were alluding to. If I, other than a dollar or two spec on Swanson, I'm not spending a lot of money on Green or Garcia where they're available because I do expect them to be gone, and I do not expect them to be closers where they land, unless it's Kansas City, as we talked earlier, being the
Sure.
one team where a closer could get moved to and could still maintain his closing role. I kind of agree with that, with the caveat that I think that might be Hunter Harvey. But yeah, I wouldn't spend a lot of money here either way.
I mean, Swanson still has another year left of arbitration. Garcia, I believe, is in his final year, and Green, I believe, has some kind of option for next year, but I think it's a decent chunk of change. I think it's double digits, from what I remember hearing. So I would venture to guess that Garcia and Green are all but gone, even if somebody doesn't want to pick up that option. Swanson could still be gone, but would be the one where they might hold on to him and he could take that role. Whether or not there are actually saves to be had on the Blue Jays is yet to be determined. Um, we'll jump around a little bit. No, we won't. No, we won't, because that doesn't make any sense. We'll get into Philadelphia here as they welcome back JT Realmuto to their lineup. Overall, they just got back, right before the break, they got back Schwarber, they got back Harper. Now they get back Realmuto. And so they seem to be as close to as full strength, at least in their lineup, as one would expect. What does the return of Realmuto look like for the Philadelphia lineup? Is there somebody that you've been eyeing that is going to be losing out that you're a little disappointed about, or it's just kind of what we kind of expected to happen at any given time?
Yeah, I think this is just what we expected. Garrett Stubbs is now the backup catcher. He had started like 4 of the previous 6 games. He's going to lose time, but remain there as the backup. I would guess that we do not see Real Muto at first base or DH. There could be a rare occasion where Kyle Schwarber plays left field. Bryce Harper is the designated hitter and JT Realmuto is the designated hitter, but he's not going to get the extra plate
Yeah,
appearances playing first base and designated hitter as we have seen him get in the past.
sure.
But the loser here, I think, is just Garrett Stubbs going to 1 or 2 games a week, and we'll see Real Muto in there 4 or 5, depending on how many games they have each week. And hopefully, JT Real Muto does JT Real Muto things.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for, right? Even if he's not getting the same kind of playing time that he might have gotten in the past, where he had the little bit of flexibility to play first base, DH every once in a while, and like you said, he'll still get a couple here or there, but not as much as maybe we would once have expected. All right, we're gonna play a little bit of we're gonna play some Ask. You know, is one of my favorite games here. It's actually the only game we play here, every once in a while, with this next news item, and we're gonna do that right after this quick break. All right, Kevin. We're gonna play Ask. We're gonna play Ask later on in the show as well, but I'm gonna give a little bit of a preview here during the news section. We got a couple more out. We got some outfielders returning to their respective teams, and so I want your take on these 3 situations. Which one of them would, for the rest of the season, would you feel most comfortable throwing into your starting lineup, without taking them out the rest of the season? Which one would you feel more comfortable streaming? Whether it's a bench streamer or what have you, and which one are you avoiding completely? So, of course, this is our avoid, stream, keep option as Ask. The returnees that I'm alluding to are Ramon Laureano returning to Atlanta, Mike Tauchman returning to the Chicago Cubs, and then Drew Waters being recalled, so returning to your Kansas City Royals. All outfielders, 2 of them coming back from injury, one of them just being recalled. And yeah, so I ask you the question I always do: which one are you keeping, which one are you streaming, and which one are you avoiding?
This is tough. The keep is the tough here because really all 3 of these guys are streamers in my mind, but based on playing time earlier in the season and the fact that in his second game back here on Saturday, Talkman was in the lineup for the Chicago Cubs. I'm going to go with Michael Talkman as my keep. Um, I'm not really confident about that, but I think he does get more playing time than the others. The other 2, I don't think either one is gonna get a whole lot of run here. I think Atlanta is gonna be perfectly happy with Eddie Rosario being back with the team now, unless Adam Duvall, continues to struggle and Laureano starts to take at bats from him. I think Eddie Rosario versus right-handed pitching is in there and a home run here on Saturday. And and the Braves facing, I think, 6 out of 7 right-handed starting pitchers next week. So we'll talk more about Eddie Rosario later in the show.
Right.
But so for that reason, by default, I'll use Drew Waters as my streamer for now. I think the Royals probably do add an outfielder here before the trade deadline. And Laureano then is my avoid.
Yeah, the Rosario obviously being just seemed like he came in the same way Laureano did. It's just like the Atlanta trying to create some kind of depth in that outfield, and Rosario kind of running with it. Laureano was doing okay until he got hurt, and obviously kind of losing that opportunity there. Um, So I guess I'm mostly curious to see what the Cubs end up doing. You talked about the Royals. You're expecting the Royals to bring in an outfielder. What exactly are the Cubs going to be doing at this deadline? And whether or not Talkman's going to either have a job in Chicago or anywhere for that matter by the time that they're done with that roster. Or maybe he backs his way into even more playing time than he was getting before. And you know how excited some of us can get about Mike Talkman if he has full-time playing time. Um,
Exactly.
all right, talked about Drew Waters being recalled. We got another recall. This was just a call up. In general, the A's call up their top prospect, shortstop Jacob Wilson, and he immediately gets hurt. Luckily, he got his first MLB hit. He scored his first MLB run, so good on him before hurting his hamstring and having to leave the game early. He was not in the lineup on Saturday, though he also was not placed on the IL either. He's scheduled to get an MRA on Sunday on his hamstring, and then I'm sure they'll make a decision on the best course of action based on those results. Very well may not know the results of those before Faab runs, but Kevin, my question is, does it matter? Like, is this a situation where you're like, okay, top prospect, I'm excited for his, this is a bad way of putting it, but like, are you excited that he got hurt so that it could keep his price down? Or were you not that interested regardless?
I am interested in certain spots. I think we have to temper our expectations here, but if you could use a batting average boost, I would ask my question this: could Stephen Kwan help my team right now? I think that's what we're looking at. A lot of people have
Sure.
I've heard the Luis Arias light. I don't think so. I think he's got a little more power than Luis Arias, kind of what we're seeing from Stephen Kwan this season. We may not see a lot of it right away. Projections have him for a handful of home runs in 200 plate appearances, so about a 15 home run guy over a full season, and roughly the same for stolen bases. But I really think that you know he's hitting towards the bottom of the lineup for Oakland as well, or at least did in his one start when he
One
got
day.
his
Yeah.
hit in his first major league at bat. Um, the projections are very greatly on batting average from 230 to 265. Big gap there, but he's always been a high average, high OBP guy in the minors, strikes out less than he walks some seasons at some stops. So if a team can use a batting average boost and not necessarily be counting on the runs scored that we can typically get from some of these guys because he's hitting towards the bottom of Oakland's lineup. So I think the spots where I'm interested are limited, but there are spots I'll be interested for those reasons. And like I said, the question I would ask myself is, would Stephen Kwan improve my team? If so, and we don't hear anything about an IL stint prior to Sunday night, I agree with you. The price is going to be very low now because if we don't know the way it was first reported was like. Oh, he got called up to the major leagues, got a hit in his first at bat, and now he's seriously injured. Is kind of the impression I got the way it was being reported. We don't know how serious it is, so yeah, I think he's worth a little spec bid this weekend.
Yeah, just the fact that they didn't throw him on the IL right away, and
Yeah,
they waited a whole 48 hours to get, or they're waiting a 48 hours to get the MRI. Um, I agree. When it first happened, I thought it was a major injury. That's what I kind of heard, or what I wanted to hear. Maybe I don't know. It's just what I heard when I read the reports. And so I guess it's a good thing. Obviously. I think I was also interested to see that Max Schumann, who'd been playing shortstop every single day prior to this call up, still got a start moving over to third base for the A's, bumping out Brett Harris, who had been playing the position. So I'm curious to see how that situation rolls out as well, because obviously Schumann's been a hot pickup in the last week or two as well. So if he continues to get that playing time, obviously that makes it a little bit more worthwhile for those pickups. But somebody to keep an eye on, or that situation, if he doesn't, if Wilson does not go on the IL for next week. If he does go on
yeah,
the
and
IL, then you're safe regardless.
right. Right. And yeah, the fact they moved him over there uh right away, immediately when Wilson was called up, and he was in the lineup every day because of his defense at shortstop. So he's probably a great defender at third base.
Here's hoping.
So I don't know much about Brett Harris defensively, but my thought is that Schumann's defense may keep him in this lineup. And just a complete side note, I did not realize until he was called up that Jacob Wilson is Jack Wilson's son, and that sent
There
me
we
into some
go.
flashbacks for a guy that was never a superstar. Jack Wilson had some amazing fantasy seasons.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, wow. Just realized I didn't realize Jack Wilson was that old. And he very well may not
Yes.
be, but
That's how old we are,
yeah,
Adam.
that's it. There it is. Well,
Yeah.
all right. Well, let's get back into some injury notes here because that is just what we do. Um, a couple of shortstops missing in action for the time being. Carlos Correa hitting the IL with plantar fasciitis, and then Bo Bichette returns to the IL as we speculated might happen last week with the calf strain to the calf that he had injured or that he had spent some time on the IL with before. Now these guys are what they are. I'm more curious about what your take on their replacements. So, are you more interested in Edouard Julien, who replaced Correa on the roster in Minnesota, or Addison Barger, who gets called back up as well to replace Bo Bichette? Not necessarily in their positions or in their spots in the lineup or whatever, just on the roster. Julien or Barger moving forward, at least during the period of time where these guys are on the IL.
Yeah, this is kind of tough because unfortunately, I don't think either one of these guys are going to get great playing time, at least
Sure.
right away. And depending on how long Correa and Bichette are out, they may not be with the teams very long, unless they hit their way to remain on the roster. I was a big fan of Edward Julian earlier this season, even with his struggles in the batting average department. He was barely hitting 200, but he'd have a 3 home run week. Next week he wouldn't hit any home runs, but he'd steal 3 bases, and that would shock me. I was getting really good results in spite of the batting average from Edward Julian, and so he is the one that I would prefer of the two. Addison Barger, just Leo Jimenez has been getting more playing time than Addison Barger. I mean, it's only been a couple of days, but that's what we've seen so far. So, but I think Julian, until the Twins start to get other players back off the IL, and there are guys coming back relatively soon, including maybe Carlos Correa, but I think he probably gets more playing time, and I'm more interested in what he can do, especially if he can boost that batting average a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it's worth, Julian actually started today on Saturday, and Barger did not. Barger not playing a whole lot prior to his demotion, and the only reason he's probably back up, obviously, is due to the injury. The only reason he would have been allowed to be called back up this quickly, um, and I agree. I mean, I like Barger a lot. I just I don't see where if the playing time wasn't there prior, not much has changed because Bichette was already dealing with injuries on and off while Barger was on the team, and yeah, so I'm worried about how much playing time he's actually going to get there.
Yeah,
Um,
Julian was on pace for a 2020 season when he was sitting down. Sure, he was striking out 34% of the time, so
sure.
therefore he's hitting 207 on the season. Projections have him striking out less than that, but still over 30%, more in line of what he did in 2023 in 408 plate appearances. In those 408 plate appearances, he hit 16 home runs and scored 60 runs. So I think he is the guy that will give us more fantasy production as long as he is in the lineup.
Um, all right, so we'll stay in Minnesota then, but we'll go into the rotation where Chris Paddock enters the IL fray with right forearm strain. Not something you typically want to see from a pitcher, especially a right-handed pitcher. What's his absence going to be on the Minnesota rotation? Do we see the likes of David Festa come back, Louis Varland? Is there anybody else that you'd rather be specking on, or do they have enough kind of leeway going forward where they could do a bullpen game here or there?
I hope it's Festa, and I think it will be. I know he got roughed up in his 10 innings that he threw in his first time being called up to the major league level, but he there's nothing for him left to do at AAA. He's been one of, if not the most dominant pitcher at AAA this season. So I think it will be him. I hope it's him, and I think he'll figure things out and do better this second time around. Uh, there's several leagues where, well, not several, but a couple of multiple leagues where I have, Schwellenbach from Atlanta, Festa in Minnesota, Drew Thorpe from the White Sox, all on the same team. And Schwellenbach and Drew Thorpe both got roughed up in their first couple of starts, just like Festa did, and now are pitching very well now that they're 7 or 8 starts into their major league careers. I really think we would see the same thing from Festa. So I hope and do think that's what we're going to see.
I hope you're right. Where I was able to grab Festa, I haven't let him go quite yet. So it'd be nice to see him back. When he was sent down, of course, he was also called back up to be the 27th man during their recent doubleheader right before the break. Did not get into either one of those games and got sent back down. Last time he pitched was on the 12th in AAA and let up 2 runs in 2/3 of an inning and got pulled. And so that just scouting the stat line here doesn't look that great. I'd like to see him with another start that looked just a little bit more comfortable. But if that next start comes in Minnesota rather than in AAA, I'm all for it. All right, last one here, Kevin. We will move over to Detroit as they are currently without Reese Olson, who he left. Not that they're without him, but he left his start early with right shoulder soreness. Some would say that's worse than a forearm strain,
Mhm.
especially for a right-handed pitcher. Uh, who are you? I'm assuming that we're not going to see Reese Olson for a little bit, and Detroit is going to need to replace him in the rotation. Who are you looking for them to? Who are you specking on if they don't make any kind of an official announcement before Faab runs on Sunday?
I think we're definitely going to see Matt Manning this week, and we really, unless they do a bullpen day, we probably need 2 guys because let me double check real quick how many games Minnesota plays. Yeah, they just have the one off day. They play 6 days. Um, so it, or excuse me, Detroit. I was looking at the wrong team. We have a 7-game week for Detroit. So roster resource has Reese Wilson in there on Thursday. We don't have any news yet. That's why. And we already have Cater Montero
Mhm.
speculatively. Well, he's definitely starting Sunday. The speculation is he stays in the rotation. We see him Friday. So that's already one guy. That's already putting Maeda back in the rotation on Tuesday after he was just moved to the bullpen. So including Maeda and Montero, they still might need someone on top of that. So I think it's Matt Manning. In fact, I he was up earlier this season. If if I thought he was going to, uh, if I like the matchup, I would be comfortable enough that it will be Manning that I would put a bid in for him on Sunday night. With it probably being a start at Cleveland or against Minnesota, I'm probably not interested, just because we haven't seen the strikeouts from Manning that a few years ago we thought we might when he reached the major leagues. So I'm, I think it's going to be Manning, but due to the schedule upcoming, I'm really not interested.
His last couple Manning's last couple starts in AAA, his last one, very good. 6 innings, no
Mhm.
runs, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. Let up a couple runs, 3 runs in his previous 2 starts prior to that. So kind of a mixed bag. So to kind of throw him right into the mix at Cleveland, the way that Cleveland's playing, the way that that park has been playing this season, not something I'm totally ecstatic about, but I'm sure we'll talk about Matt Manning a little bit later on in the show as well. All right. Well, that'll sum up what we've got for our news and notes. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we did not talk about. We try to keep it as Faab related as possible to learn everything that's going on in the week's worth of news. You should be listening to the First Pitch podcast with Casey Bubba on the weekdays and Jake Crumpler on the weekends. They break down all the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league. And of course, for all things starting pitching, Nick Pollock has you covered with the Plus Pitch podcast every weekday morning. He'll highlight every starting pitching performance from the day prior and looking ahead at tomorrow's streamer options for your pickup pleasure. In just a moment, we're going to play some more Ask with some players that are rostered in a kind of an extreme way based on 15 teamers and 12 teamers. We'll do that right after this quick break. All right, we are back. Of course, you're still listening to On the Wire. You have not changed your podcast channel. I appreciate that. I am Adam Howe, joined, of course, by Kevin Hastings. And Kevin, I'm gonna ask you to play Ask a couple more times. And we were going to talk about something completely different, and then there was literally one player I was going to bring up, and the question I was going to ask about said player was, do we trust what's going on here? And then I'm like, you know what? I want to check where can I actually pick him up? And he was 100%. We'll get to him, by the way. He was 100% rostered in the main event, but he was only like or just under 30%. Actually, I think it's even more. He's just under 30% rostered in your NFBC online championships. Of course, these are 15 teamers versus our 12 teamer formats that we use as our benchmarks here. And when they started questioning, like, when do we start trusting what players are doing at the 12 team level, right? Where obviously, and you're playing in these 15 teamers, they have either been trusted for a while, or you're more apt to more teams or more leagues are more apt to take the chance and roster some said players earlier, because you have to like you just have to take more risk, right? And so I've got a bunch of groupings of players that have major differences in roster shifts between the main event and the online championships. Of course, again, 15 teamers versus 12 teamers. And we're at a point in the season where, yes, some of these roster shifts are going to fluctuate because they're going to be streamed players more aptly based on matchups. We talked about this last week, of course, with a couple of different pitchers, but it's going to happen with hitters as well. So I thought this was a good time of year to kind of look at this. So without any further ado, I'm going to get right into groupings of these players, and then get your take on each one of them, and then also your overall sense of why some of these players' roster shifts are so different from these types of two different types of formats. And we won't even go into Yahoo or CBS roster shift percentages, because those are those are definitely going to be different based on the position that we're talking about. We're going to start off with the pitchers. One of those is the one that I alluded to earlier. It's JP Sears. 97% rostered in the main event, only 32% rostered in the online championship. Next one up, Colin Ray, 98 in the main event, 34% in the online. And then Clark Schmidt, 93% in the main and 31% in the online championship. Obviously, these are pitchers. It's a little bit of a different bag than the hitters we're going to get into because of the streaming aspect that you see more often with starting pitchers. But the fact that these guys are all so readily rostered in the 15 teamers tells me that these guys aren't guys they're not being dropped a lot and then picked back up the following week. Could be wrong on that. I haven't checked the roster shift from the week prior or what have you. But I ask you, like, which one of these guys are you most comfortable, picking up in a 12 teamer to keep the rest of the season, to stream the rest of the season, and you still would be avoiding even in the 12 teamers?
Well, unfortunately, and this this kind of probably takes away from the spirit of the game here. But unfortunately, I think Clark Schmidt is still too far away. So I think he's my avoid here. I would say that if he was going to be back in a week or two, he would be my keep. But I think he's my avoid. He's throwing off a mound the first time today as we're recording on Saturday. So it'll still be a few weeks before we see Clark Schmidt. Otherwise, he would be. He was performing very well, especially early in the season. Um, I'm going to go with JP Sears here as my keep. I did drop him in a couple of spots and then picked him back up recently. We've talked about that the past couple of weeks, but in the games that I picked him back up for, I believe they were both versus the Angels. Imagine that. He performed very well. He has
Who would have thought?
Houston this week. I probably won't start him, but then that does lead to him facing the next couple of times out. If he pitches Wednesday versus Houston, he misses the Angels, and it's a 4-game series. He would get the Angels again, but misses them. But he go at San Francisco. We love that, getting to pitch in that ballpark. And then he would get the Chicago White Sox the following week and probably a two-step. And I haven't even looked far enough ahead to see who that would be. We're getting 3 weeks ahead now. So JP Sears, while he's a team streamer, as we've learned to say these days, Paul Sporer still uses that term all the time. Um, that's still a keep, right? We're keeping him on our roster for the team streamers. So that's JP Sears for me. Colin Ray would be my actual streamer. It appears that over the next couple of starts anyway, we're looking at the Chicago Cubs, and then he gets Atlanta the following week. So he's my streamer. I would pitch him at Chicago. Atlanta's bats are waking up a little bit. I would not pitch him at home versus Atlanta. So therefore, he's my streamer. So yeah, I think this one pretty much took care of itself. The schedule and the timing and Clark Schmidt's injury still not being completely done. I think that made this one fairly easy. Maybe not for most people, but I think JP Sears might be my new Wade Miley.
Did you? I mean, you've been dropping JP Sears though. Would you ever have dropped Wade Miley?
Oh yeah, I've dropped Wade Miley many times because nobody else is going to pick him up. It's like having a free roster spot. Yeah,
your designated Wade Miley roster spot. All right, yeah. So the game, obviously, you did a good job of staying within the rules of the game. I appreciate that. I will admit, like, it's a weird situation because you're trying to figure out really the point here is to figure out who's got it right. Like, are there too many teams holding on in the 15 teamers to something that's not really working out, or they should be, cutting bait on? Or is there something more there that the 12 team leagues are not, like, they're just worried that is going to fall out, but you're confident they're not going to. And I think that applies better to the hitter situations that we'll get into right now. We'll lead it off with the player that kind of started this with Juan Yepez, 100% rostered in the main event, and then 30% rostered in those online championships. Right next to Brandon Drury, 90% in the main event, 20% online, and then Nolan Schanuel, 100% in the main event and 34%. So these guys have very, very similar roster ships. Drury is the only one you could actually pick up in the main event right now. Still 10% of leagues available, but obviously that 10% transfers over to 12 teamers as well where he is 10% less rostered over there as well. So Drury, all these guys, well, sorry, Drury and Yepez have two different eligibilities at positions. Yepez outfield, first base, Drury first base, second base. Chanel still just at the first base, I believe. If that plays a role, fine. But ask you, of these three infielders, Yepez having the extra outfield eligibility as well, which one of them do you feel most comfortable keeping? Which one would you have to stream, and which one are you still avoiding? You're like, no, there's not enough here.
Yeah, this is interesting because I know Juan Yepes has, I think he's hit in all 11 games
It's been
he
crazy.
arrived in
Like,
Washington.
should we be trusting this?
And I was a big Juan Yepes fan a couple of years ago. And what I came across, I'm not sure if it was this off season or if it was towards the end of last regular season. He just doesn't hit the ball hard, and that really turned me off of him because I had thought of him as a power hitter in the minor leagues, and he did have some home run numbers, but he does not hit the ball hard. And even in just the very small sample that he has so far, max EV is still 106. I know he's only had like 11 games, so he hasn't had much of a chance to do that. He is hitting the ball harder than he has in his past MLB stints. Uh, Once again, smaller sample size, but his hard hit percentage is a good 7.5 percentage points higher than it's ever been in the past. So that's a good sign. But one home run, 47 plate appearances. I know we're not extrapolating 47 plate appearances, but that's still not a good rate. Even though I felt like people got excited when he hit his home run the other day, and that I just don't see it. I don't think he's hitting the ball hard. So a guy that I used to be really excited about and excited to see, he's probably my avoid here. I think the hits stop dropping, and he won't hit many out of the park. So I just think we're looking at a guy that's going to hit like 240 with no home runs or stolen bases. So I don't have much interest. Although he may, as long as he does keep that up, that may keep him in the lineup. So he may get more playing time than Brandon Drury. Um, I'm trying to talk myself into not avoiding Juan Yepes here, Adam, but I can't do it. I'm going to stream Drury due to Shanuel's playing time. He's my keep, even though I'm not that excited about him either. But yeah, I think this would surprise a lot of people when we're talking about these three players. Juan Yepes, I think if we put a poll out there, would be the most popular of these three players. There may still be some people that like Brandon Drury from the past couple of seasons, but yeah, he's my avoid. And I'll keep Shanuel and drop and stream Drury.
I mean, the question will be, where is Drury still in Anaheim? Come 10 days from now. Last year of his
Right.
contract, not that much months. 8.5 million on the year. So obviously, just prorate that throughout the rest of the season. Somebody has to pick up. And
And
you
remember what we saw the Angels do last season. I fully expect them to do this again. If they don't find a trade partner, Brandon Drury is going to be put on waivers, but
yeah,
before
sure.
the end of August, and somebody's going
They
to get
did
him
that
for
with
free.
Renfro, right? Right? Yeah,
Right?
Renfro was the
They
obvious
did it with
example.
4 or 5 guys.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, all at the same time.
Grichuk. Yeah, they did it with Grichuk and a couple others as well.
Oh yes, that was crazy. Um, you'd think that they could find it. Maybe they just weren't trying very hard, which seems like something the Angels might do. Not try very hard. All right. Well, let's we got a couple of other outfielders here that I grouped together. All pretty much rostered across the main event. with one slight exception. That's Charlie Blackmon, 93% roster in the main event, 30% in the online. Lamont Wade Jr., 98% in the main, 33% online. And then Matt Wallner at 98% in the main and 39% in the OC. Which one of these outfielders are you keeping streaming or avoiding based on what you've seen or what you expect to see, at least in the next couple of weeks, if not the rest of the season? In
I'm gonna
12
go with
teamers.
the next couple of
Yeah.
weeks. I'm gonna go with the next couple of weeks here because the guy I absolutely love is Matt Wallner. And until Minnesota starts to get some guys back from injury, which we mentioned earlier, they have some guys that will be coming back. But he is in the lineup every day, crushing baseballs. And Matt Wallner is easily my keep of these guys. Um, I'm going to take the cop out and say because of the streaming when he's at home in Coors means he is a streamer. That makes Charlie Blackmon my streamer here. And I like Lamont Wade Jr., but between the injuries and the platooning in San Francisco, we just haven't seen a lot from him this season. I do expect him to perform better going forward as long as he stays healthy. But unfortunately, by default, he'll be my avoid here. I mean, any Colorado Rocky is a streamer, right?
I mean that leads me to like the point of this whole exercise with Lamont Wade Jr. When somebody you can't rely on to play every day, and you can't rely on to be healthy enough to play. When he can play. Why is he still so readily rostered even in 15 teamers? Um, it just seems like this is the type of situation where it's like, and he's still 33% roster in the online. So it's like he's still being rostered in a third of 12 teamers. Is this not a situation where we talked about those tough drops recently on a recent show, like where you have to start really considering yourself, like, is he produced even when he's healthy and in the lineup? Is he producing enough where this is not just a strain on your roster where you can't take another risk somewhere else down the road? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and he's not hitting for the power. He's never had a ton of power, but he's had moderate power in the past. But 3 home runs and 215 plate appearances just doesn't cut it for somebody that's not giving us stolen bases either. The batting average is huge, but it's way above anything he's ever done in the past. That's probably coming back down. All the projections have his batting average dropping about 50 points for the remainder of the season. So I just don't see a lot there from Lamont Wade Jr. that we have seen, in 2023 and 2021. 2022, he was banged up quite a bit as well, and we didn't see him. If like we talked with Wilson earlier and Arias and Stephen Kwan came up in that conversation. Lamont Wade Jr. is hitting for a great batting average. That does come with a 400 BABIP on the season, but he is projected, even though it's 50 points lighter, it's still a 250, 260 batting average is his projections. So if you think he's going to continue to outperform that, he could be a bit of a batting average boost, but we're just not getting home runs or stolen bases from him this year.
yeah, and I also wonder if like this type of player that like teams are holding on to because they just don't want to see them succeed on somebody else's roster. We are beyond the point of the season where you need to start worrying about that. You need to worry about your roster more so than everybody else's. Yes, there's a way to play defense, and you don't obviously want the person above. But if you're not trusting them enough to actually play on your teams as well, that'd be interesting. I should probably look up to see. Let's see. He's being started almost everywhere where he's rostered. 98% roster in the main, 86% started this past, in this current week that we're sitting in. So people are playing him, so they trust him to actually produce. The problem is, like you keep saying, he's not actually
And
producing.
remember, we talked about this last week. San Francisco does have an 8-game week coming up, and so he'll
And
be
they are in
4
Colorado
at the
right now, if
Dodgers.
I'm right?
They're in Colorado this
Yeah,
weekend,
sure.
and then they get 4 at the Dodgers, and then 4 back home against Colorado again. Yes, it's in San Francisco, but they get Colorado pitching on the road. So
They get you. All right, something to consider. All right, last category here. I left the or I left the relievers here for the end spot, Kevin. And there's a decent amount of relievers that are readily rostered in the 15 teamers that are obviously either more streamable or more or less rostered, very much so in the 12 teamers. So I picked 3 guys that are definitely second in line or could move into a position with an injury or with a trade in one of, at least with one of these situations, rather than just going with the guys that we talk about all the time in our ratios category that are just, they're gonna be valuable, but you're probably not holding on to them each and every week. So it wouldn't really be fair to throw one of those in an ask game here. But the names I got here are Jason Adam, 97% in the main, 32% in online. Ben Joyce, 98% in the main, 25% in the online. And then Griffin Jacks, 91% in the main, 19% in the online championship. Of course, Jason Adam was drafted in a whole lot of places well before the last round of most drafts, both 12s and 15 teamers, with Pete Fairbanks having injury concerns of his own, even though this is one of those rare times where we really felt like we knew exactly who the closer was in Tampa Bay. And, Fairbanks has held onto that pretty much all season. But at any moment, Jason Adam could, take that spot. Ben Joyce speculating will, I was going to mention him later on anyway, but he'd be the spec ad here in Anaheim to take over the closer role if Carlos Estevez were to be traded, which most all of us expect to happen. And then Griffin Jacks basically had the role before Juan Duran came back from his injury at the beginning of the season, even if it was a little bit of a mixed bag with the Minnesota bullpen. And he's just been lights out, pretty much, well, honestly, his whole career in the bullpen. So I'll ask you, with these 3 guys, who are you avoiding, who are you keeping, and who are you streaming?
well, I would at least stream all 3 of these guys. We know that. But so that aside, if we're basing this on, and I think we are, these being speculative closers with guys ahead of them both having injury risk, and we have the trade deadline coming up. Uh, I don't think Duran's going anywhere for Minnesota. And yes, he was injured earlier in the season, but I don't think he has the injury concerns that Pete Fairbanks has. So, even though he may have the best stuff of all 3 of these guys, and probably is a guy I'd put in any lineup if I had to. Griffin Jacks for this exercise is going to be my avoid, even though I think he's the best pitcher of the 3.
Right. Sure.
Basing this on saves. Now, last week I mentioned Luis Garcia if Estevez got moved, and that was a mistake because he hasn't been good for a couple of weeks. I think everybody agrees right now that if and when Estevez is moved, that Ben Joyce gets the job. But how many save opportunities are they going to get? I
Fair.
think because of that, because of the team context, Ben Joyce probably gets the most save opportunities going forward. But because of the team context, he still might not. He's going to be my streamer, and Jason Adam is going to be my keeper here because not only is Peter Fairbanks an injury risk, I'm not so sure Tampa won't move him at the deadline. So I think Adam is my keeper here, and Joyce the streamer. I wouldn't fault anybody for flip flopping those 2, and the only reason I'm avoiding Jax is I think he's the least likely to get saves going forward. You're muted, Adam.
Going back to Anaheim, let's keep in mind Luis Garcia also on the final year of his contract. So very well, if not traded, then DFA'd, regardless of his actual
Right.
production. So yeah, I was wanted to check to see how much money Pete Fairbanks actually has on that contract, and how easily that would be for Tampa to move on from. But he is under control for quite some time, with buying out his arbitration years through 2025, and there's a club option to buy him out in 2026, as well. So not that much, 3.6 million a year for those arbitration years. So they, yeah, I'm not putting it past them to make a move here. And it wouldn't be difficult for them to do so at that cost. So yeah, interesting thoughts there as well. I agree with you. Jax very well might be the best reliever of the bunch. But yeah, the whole idea here is obviously trying to see who's going to get some saves 10 days from now. All right, fun game. Let's get into some actual Fab recommendations for the 17th Fab run of the 2024 season. Kevin, we are going to do that right after this break. All right, you're still listening to On the Wire. Thank you so much for following along with us for the 17th time of the season. Kevin, let's get right into our power categories here: home runs, RBIs. Juan Yepez is obviously was the one that came to mind for me, and that's what started that whole last conversation. Obviously, wouldn't be a name you would put here as a recommendation for power, as you don't expect it to manifest itself. So who do you got going forward for some power spots?
I think we're looking at a repeat of last season where anytime Atlanta is facing right-handed pitching, Eddie Rosario is a must get in your lineup. He showed us that today. He got off to a slow start with Atlanta today, Saturday. It was his first home run since joining the team. Been there about a week, but I think he just slides back into the role he had last season. He was obviously very comfortable being a strict platoon, large side platoon player for Atlanta. And I think we see that going forward the rest of the season. He's available in nearly three-quarters of 15-team main events and 97% of 12-team RotoWire online championships. He's available. And this first full week out of the break, since he has been called up to Atlanta, 7-game week, 6 of them appear to be versus right-handed starting pitching. So loving me some Eddie Rosario this week.
Nice. The beauty of us recording on a Saturday night is I'm able to peruse our PL projection sheet for the next week as those projections come out on Saturday mornings. And so got some names to throw out there that PL bot would recommend in the power category. Somebody we talked about last week as a possible spec ad here and getting all the playing time we expected. Even in the large side of a platoon, Seth Brown with the Oakland Athletics should be facing 5 out of 6 right-handed pitchers next week. He might even get 6 out of 6, but we'll see how that works out. But not slated to face off against rotations that have a whole lot of lefty options in their rotation. And then Mickey Moniak also rated pretty highly on the PL projections here. Been producing quite well for Anaheim and in that lineup, and looking to PL bot likes him to continue moving forward as well. So some previews there for a full list of projections. Obviously, you got to join PL Pro over at pitcherlist.com/premium. And sign up for the full list. You'll get that weekly list. I'll get a couple more names in each category moving forward. But again, for the full list, you gotta join up. So we're looking for some speed, Kevin. I will throw out PL Bot's name first here because he's not as readily available. He's more available than I thought he was after looking up the roster ships here. And that is Jake Fraley. Who I think just in general being in Cincinnati, playing time always seems to be a concern. And PLBot doesn't think he's playing every day either. But the fact is that he's still in Cincinnati and he's still looking to run and still is able to run based on who he's got going on for next week. So Jake Fraley is somebody PLBot is pretty confident about in that category moving forward, at least for this coming week. So somebody to keep an eye on. By your eyes and your eyes only, Kevin, who are you looking at to steal some bases, score some runs?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that he was as highly rostered as he is in main events. Not a ton surprised because he has been up for 16 games now. But just over the past few games, Xavier Edwards in Miami, who is the everyday shortstop and probably going forward because he is who they want to be their shortstop of the future. They've played 3 games versus left-handed starters and 3 games versus right-handed starters over the last 6 games, and he has started each one of them. Yes, he's hitting at the bottom of the order, but recently he's been taken off on the base paths. I believe all 3 of his stolen bases are in the past 6 or 7 games, and he's only played, like I said, 16, so there wasn't a whole lot there. Um, Walks almost 12% of the time, striking out well under 20% of the time. Huge OBP guy. Going all the way back to 2018, he's got about 11 stops of different lengths here on roster resource, including the minor leagues. And it's kind of cool. There's not any like 4 or 5 game stints. I think everything is at least 20 some games every stop, other than his current major league stop, where once again 16 games. He's never got on base at under a 328 clip. And right now, his BABIP's well over 400, leading to an OBP over 400. But I don't think that OBP is coming down much. He is, even at the bottom of the order, going to have a lot of opportunities to steal bases for Miami going forward. And we know bad teams turn guys loose, turn guys like this loose, especially late in the season. I think we could see double-digit steals out of Xavier Edwards the rest of the way.
Yeah, he was in a secondary grouping for the last ask game that we talked about, and I was also very surprised to see the rostership so high, even in 15 teamers, at 88% there, just based on what we kind of saw him do the last time around, and not knowing exactly what he was going to be, kind of doing in his role with this startup, but with anybody else. If you need the category, you need the category. It's simple. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
he's
in the
showing that he's going
12s,
to do it.
even if it's in the 12s, even if this isn't gonna be a long-term thing, this is a
Right.
good week to go after him. They have a 7-game week this week, so the rate he has been getting on base, not just this season, but throughout his entire career, he should have a lot of stolen base opportunities this week.
There you go. More opportunities, more times to run. All right. We'll move into said opportunity section here. Nice segue there. Appreciate that. With some schedule notes here, lot like you mentioned earlier, a lot of teams with the full 7-game slate or 8. With 7 games, we have Tampa Bay, the White Sox, Cleveland, Detroit, the Angels, Oakland, Texas, Atlanta, Miami, the Mets, the Dodgers, and then the San Francisco Giants do have their 8-game week with their doubleheader against Colorado over the weekend. Nobody has 2 off days this coming week. And then nobody has any weird off days. All the off days come on Monday or Thursday. Colorado is home for 3 versus Boston, and then 4 at San Francisco. Cincinnati has 3 at Tampa and 3 at Atlanta. So nobody's playing Great American Small Park this coming week. Even the aforementioned Jake Fraley. So with all that in mind, Kevin, and anything else you want to consider, who would you like to take advantage of what they have ahead of them for this coming week?
Uh, Opportunity-wise, especially for 12 teamers, he is available in more 15s than I would have thought. Kind of the opposite, but the same rostership percentages and gaps of the guys we were just talking about earlier. In most of the game, he's rostered in 84% of main event leagues, only 29% of online championships, and I'm talking about Angel Martinez or Angel. I apologize. I should have looked that up before pronouncing his name. But Martinez, he's hitting second in the lineup every single day as the everyday shortstop. And Cleveland has a 7-game week coming up, and he's been performing. Not a lot of power, not a lot of stolen bases, but hitting second in a lineup, scoring as many runs as Cleveland has scored this season is going to fill up the runs and RBI categories for us. And especially in those 16% of 15 teamers where he's available, I would definitely be interested. But he's a great middle infield option right now, even in 12s, I would say, when he has a 7-game week like he has coming up right now.
Yeah, anytime you take advantage of those 7-game weeks, you gotta do that. If there's not a lot of guys available from San Francisco or that have the 8-game week, then just go to the 7-game week. That's fine. Still plenty of plate appearances there. All right, we got some pitching to highlight here in just a moment, but of course we're gonna take another quick break. All right, get right into it, Kevin. Wins and K's volume options here. You got plenty to mention. I'm going to push PL bots into the ratio category because you got plenty of guys to consider in various different circumstances based on availability. And there's one that I really thought the availability would be a lot tighter, but it is very minuscule. We'll get to them. You'll get to him later on. But hit me with all the names I got to consider based on my needs here.
Yeah, we've been interested in Albert Suarez off and on throughout the season. Obviously, great lineup behind him in Baltimore, and he is 100% rostered in main events, but available in over half of online championships, 12 teamers. And he has a 2-step at Miami. Love that matchup. And then back home at San Diego, not great, but will definitely take it in order to get that start at Miami where he is available. I have several guys listed that may not be available in a lot of NFBC leagues because we're expecting them back this week. But I did list them here in other formats. Definitely grab them for this week. And even if you're not going to start them on their first game back, but several starting pitchers are expected back this week, including Jeffrey Springs. At some point, it appears he would probably start at Toronto. I may even throw him out there for that start. I believe Nick has him listed as a do not start in his first game back at Toronto, which I totally get, but he's 0% in the 15-team main events. He was injured before we drafted main events. He is rostered in 2% of the online championships, so available almost everywhere, but we may not be able to bid on him, or in NFBC, we will not be able to until next week. Zach Littell in Tampa, at New York Yankees, that's a little iffy, but they've been kind of struggling recently. And then back home versus Cincinnati, he doesn't have a lot of availability, but there is enough that it's worth checking. He's available in 7% of 15-team leagues and almost 30% of the 12s. Been a lot of talk over the past few weeks about Yariel Rodriguez. 100% rostered in main events. We'll get to some guys that aren't, but he is. But again, available in almost 30% of 12-team leagues. I would be looking at him in 12s as he gets Tampa this week. Not somebody that Tampa been better offensively of late, but still not somebody that scares me away. Here's a guy with quite a bit of availability for the Houston Astros, Jake Bloss. Does appear he's going to get a start at Oakland. Yes, Oakland at times has been much better than we expected this season. At other times, they do exactly what we did expect from them this season. I would take that chance with Jake Bloss for Houston this week, especially with their offense picking it up. They're back in first place in the AL West. It only took them, 22 games to make up a 10-game deficit, and they're back on top in the AL West. So that offense is clicking, and I would throw Jake Bloss out there at Oakland. In spite of getting blown up on Friday, I am interested in Griffin Canning at Seattle. They just strike out so much versus right-handed starting pitching. And he's available in a third of 15-team leagues and almost 90% of 12-team leagues. And yes, I would throw him at Seattle in a 12-team league in spite of what we saw last evening. Carson Fulmer, we'll see him at Oakland tomorrow, but then he does get them back at home over the weekend. He's not rostered anywhere. And I would use him in that Oakland start unless we see something absolutely horrible on Sunday in his start at Oakland. I I'm really not interested here, but I would understand somebody in a really tough spot that really needs wins and strikeouts, which is the category we're talking about here. Ratios already either not worth worrying about, they're blown, or you have a nice cushion in ratios. I could understand some appeal for Hogan Harris for his two-step at home versus Houston. At least that one's at home, and then at the Angels to get that Angels start. The fact that the Houston start is in Oakland, better ballpark than if it were in Houston. I think in some 15-team leagues, I may try to pull that off, acquire Hogan Harris and get him in my lineup this week for that two-step. Andrew Heaney, we know he's up and down, and he's not available in many spots, but he is available in almost 20% of 12-teamers. So I thought he was worth listing for his start at Toronto this week. Max Meyer, not available in many places. We've been talking about him off and on over the past few weeks, expecting to see him back sometime this season. Miami has come out and publicly stated that we will see him this season, but we don't know when. Casey Bubba made this point this week. I'm not sure if it was on Bubba in the Bloom or First Pitch on a weekday for Pitcher List here, Pitcher List Podcast Network, but I'm pretty sure it was Bubba that mentioned one of the beat writers in Miami wrote that as of Sunday, as in tomorrow, as in today, if you're listening to this on Sunday morning, Max Myers has been down in the minor leagues long enough that his earlier stint in the majors earlier this season is now out the window, and they have a full another year of control if they wait until Sunday to call up Max Meyer. So fully expecting to see him this week. He's still heavily rostered. Most people hung on to him. He is available in a handful of main events and almost 20% of 12-team leagues. Definitely worth checking. Not a great two-step first time back, if that is indeed where he slides in this week. Roster Resource has him facing Baltimore and then going to Milwaukee. I probably I don't think I'd start him, even if I was rostering him, depending on my other options, of course. David Peterson, we know that the strikeouts can be great and the walks can be horrible. That's the way it's been with David Peterson for a while now. He gets at Miami and then versus Atlanta. I I'll take the chance versus Atlanta to get that at Miami start. Here's a guy with quite a bit of availability, Tyler Phillips. It appears he will pitch at Cleveland. He's been really good this season, and appears to be lining up for a start versus Cleveland. Pretty good offense, but I think I would take that shot with Tyler Phillips. As we talked last week, it does appear now that DJ Hers is going to be back, and get San Diego. this week. 84% rostered in main events, but only 22%. Kind of a theme with some of these pitchers that goes into the ask game, Adam. We're seeing a lot of big gaps here between 15-team main events and 12-team online championships, which does make a little more sense with pitching than some of the position players. 9 pitchers being started per team, 12, 13 being rostered. We're talking 30 plus more pitchers being rostered in a 15-team league. So it does make sense, but big gap there for DJ Hers. Gilbert Diaz has been a popular guy the past couple of weeks, still available in a lot of 12 teamers. Once again, only 17% rostered as opposed to 88% in the mains. And he is at Kansas City, who is an up and down offense, not somebody I'm running away from, not somebody I'm starting against in DFS, but I'm not running away from it. And he gets then Pittsburgh as well. Same lineup, much better than we thought it would be coming into the season, but not running away from them. For a 2-step, I'll take both of those easily. Landon Knack, once again, I feel like I could just put this on repeat. Over 90% rostered in mains, less than 40% rostered in 12s. He gets San Francisco this week. Couple more guys coming back. Clayton Kershaw. We do a lot of speculation. We may see him this week. I believe that we were told. I'm trying to remember how he worded it. I'm not so sure his next start won't be with the team. Is I believe what we heard from the manager in LA. So Clayton Kershaw, 2%, 7%, not drafted. Won't be able to bid on him till next week in NFBC formats, but we may see him this week on other sites. Go ahead and grab him. The velocity in his rehab starts has been even lower than what we saw prior to his injury, but it's Clayton Kershaw. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt until we see it not work for him. And then we talked about him at the beginning of the show. Robbie Ray, available almost everywhere, but really try to find out when he may start this week before making the decision to get him in the lineup or not. So a lot of starters there, many of them some availability in 15s, but a ton in 12s, and then a few that are more available in the 15s as well. And several, one guy I forgot to add here, also could be back this week, Kodai Senga. He's almost universally rostered still, but anywhere he might be available, we might see him this week as well.
If I had one of those like applause buttons, Kevin, this is where I would press it for you. It was well done. Yeah, it's you forget about the whole NFBC injury. If you haven't played at all this season, you very well may not be available. And as you said that, I went to go check, and I'm like, yeah, no. The league that I have open right now, Clayton Kershaw is rostered, but Robbie Ray and this Robbie Ray was the one I was surprised to see such low percentages, and now it's clicking to realize why his percentage is so low. It should be lower. The fact
this
that
is why a couple of times this season we have pointed out that if you pull up a player's card on the NFBC site and then hit the free agency tab, it lists all your leagues and whether or not that player is available. It doesn't list your leagues in the leagues where he's not in the player pool yet. So using that free agency tab is a easy way to find all of your leagues where he will be available once he does play a game, because those leagues don't even show up at all. So those are leagues that he will be available in once he plays a game.
That's nice. Yeah. Now I have to pick up Kershaw and check to see that situation there and figure that out. Now I have to also find a league in which Robbie Ray is available just to see where it is. The thing is, he's not available anywhere because the fact that he's 2% roster in the main event means somebody, at least one, if not two
Pull him up
teams
on that
drafted
page.
him.
Where on that page you can click on him to get his card,
Sure,
and then click free agency. That's how I've been doing it.
There you go.
Anywhere, as long as he's rostered somewhere, then you can get to his card that way.
PL bot, just to kind of move into the ratio category, likes Matt Manning if he does get the call in, even with the possible matchup against Cleveland or Minnesota. 5% roster in the main event, readily available there. They also like Robbie Ray, regardless if when where he might start. We talked plenty about him enough as it is. And then Lance Lynn for your 12 teamers. Possible that Lance Lynn gets a two-step this week, but more likely he gets a two-step the following week. Available in a third of 12 teamers in the online championship as well. So take a look at those situations if you so choose. And that'll, some of those are more strikeout win related. And, Matt Manning might be more of a ratio play if he can, keep that control in check against a hot team like Cleveland. So we'll move into the ratios then with that. Who are you adding to the docket of players to stream in and out based on usage, based on ratios, and what they have going on for next week?
Yeah, as we've been saying for several weeks now, a guy to add to the list. The guys we've talked about the past several weeks are probably still available in a lot of spots. And Ryan Walker in San Francisco, I don't think we've talked about him, Adam, but I feel like I've heard you talk about him. So I'm wondering if you and Lucas might have talked about him when Lucas was here a couple of weeks back. Still only 32% rostered in mains, 1% in online championships. San Francisco with that 8-game week coming up. He did pitch on Friday, Ryan Walker, and got roughed up a little bit. My hope is that means we don't see him for the weekend. So going
Yeah.
into an 8-game week, he's fresh and ready to go on Monday. And he's got 6 wins to go along with the amazing ratios. He's being used in those situations, not something we've been able to like really pin down and put a number on how can we figure out which relievers get in a position to get wins, but it just makes sense to me that there are certain guys for certain teams that are relied upon in tight ball games, whether it be tied, whether they be down by a run, and used in the mid to later innings to get that opportunity. And he's had that come to fruition 6 times already this season. He could be looking at double-digit wins before we're through. So definitely Ryan Walker with that 8-game week will be towards the top of my lists of these types of pitchers for this week.
And you know what? First thing out of someone's mouth might be to say, well, you just got to look to see who's the first man up out of the bullpen. It's not always true. I mean, usually
It
if you're the
depends on the
first man
situation.
up, something bad's happening. Usually,
Right.
and or the team's not on a streak where they're scoring runs, and so maybe you do come in a tie game in the 5th, but that's not where your team is making the lead change here to give you the win opportunity. And for what it's worth, in Yahoo and probably other platforms of that nature, Ryan Walker is nice to see that he has the SPRP eligibility in those leagues as well. So if you do have some restrictions in those SPARF leagues, it's a nice grab, especially with the 8-game work week ahead of them. All right, we'll move into saves here. Final pitching category. I'm just gonna throw a name out there again. 12 teamers still readily available. Ben Joyce, you gotta go grab him now because he's not gonna be so available next week and next week. Coming into the trade deadline, if he is available, he's gonna cost a whole lot more when that trade goes down. In Anaheim, regardless of how many save opportunities you might have, saves are saves. He's going to have that role. Grab him while you can. So, Kevin, who else is out there that you're willing to take the spec ad now rather than wait until closer to the trade deadline?
Yeah, several. We've been approaching the trade deadline for the past few weeks, so a lot of the guys we have talked about. Ben Joyce is a great one. AJ Puck, if Tanner Scott is moved. I don't think they'll move Puck, but as as Bubba and Ryan were talking this week on Bubba and the Bloom, he's older than we realize. I agree with them. I still think of AJ Puck as a recent
Sure.
prospect, right? Well, he's pushing 30 years old already, but I still don't think they'll move him. So I think AJ Puck is a great spec, and the one I wrote down on the outline is the same guy I had last week, and we talked about earlier in the show. It's Hunter Harvey. I'm really curious to see what the Royals do, and I think there's definitely non-zero and a decent chance that Hunter Harvey is the closer for Kansas City going forward. And they have um I don't always put a lot of stock in these types of lists. Things can change very quickly, but based on the first almost 100 games for most teams this season, Kansas City has the second easiest schedule going forward. That should hopefully lead to some wins, which would lead to save opportunities.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of speculation in Miami too about Andrew Nardi being taking over that role. I didn't realize how much control they still Nardi had. He hasn't even hit arbitration yet, and he won't until 2026. So there's something to be said about the whole situation with giving guys closing opportunities now rather than when they're about to hit arbitration. We talked about this with
Right.
Rebe and Milwaukee and all that. So I don't think it's out of the question that Nardi takes the last 2 months of the season for Miami in the closer role, and then not have the job at the beginning of 2025, because then that gives them enough time to be like, oh yeah, he got some saves, but that was like 2 years ago, and not have to argue about that in arbitration cases. So Andrew Nardi, keep an eye on that situation in Miami because it's all but guaranteed that Tanner Scott will be gone. I do ultimately agree that I think Miami does want to get some kind of value out of Puck, and they're not opposed to trading him. But after the trades that they made, he was obviously an acquisition that they brought in, and they probably want to bring up his value a little bit more before they actually move him again. If they actually do. So I would say, yeah,
Yep.
throw him at the end of games, put a spotlight on him, and then trade him in the offseason or, sometime next year. All right. Finished up all our pitching. Kevin, hit me with a wild card. We kind of hit a lot of wild card options throughout this episode. And as we get closer and closer to
Right.
trade deadline, almost every pick is a wild card pick.
That's
Anybody else that didn't
exactly
really
where I was
fit?
going here. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going here, Adam. You know, we're I for me, we're past stashing, and unless it's on one of these guys that we're still waiting on, maybe just another week or two. We only have 10 weeks left to go. Even being out a month is half of that. I don't think I'm waiting on guys I don't expect back until September now, whether I already have them stashed or whether they're a stashing opportunity. But several of the guys we brought up that we don't really know about yet, these are the guys I'm adding where I can. Jeffrey Springs, Max Meyer, Robbie Ray, Clayton Kershaw, right? All of these guys we expect to see back as soon as this week, depending on site and availability. Any and all of these guys I'm interested in. Some of them more than others, but we've talked about it all season how dry the starting pitching pool is, especially in 15 teamers. We listed all these names earlier. Most of them at least 80% rostered in the 15 team leagues. These guys next to nothing because we can't bid on them yet. As soon as we can, or double check your leagues. Like I double checked Robbie Ray. I drafted him in the main event in the last round. I knew he was available in my league. Someone else has already picked him up,
There it
but
is.
that is one of the 2% of leagues where he is rostered. It is my main event. So check on all those guys, especially with the way starting pitching has gone this season and the way I do expect, and we've started to kind of see it, it's really hot a lot of places around the country. I haven't heard so much about a dead ball the past couple of weeks as we've been hearing
Right?
for the first couple of months of the season, Adam.
No, not when you have guys like Randy Rosarina hitting double bombs in 2 days straight, and the
Yeah.
ball seems to be flying. It's summertime. Who would have thought? Yeah, that's all great stuff. I will add Tyler Mahle into the mix of conversation because he is starting or he's continuing his rehab stint for Texas as well. Expected back probably in early August. So not quite waiting all the way to September for him. Not probably not the same level at the Robbie Rays where you're going to get back, but like you said, if starting pitching is really that dry, you got to keep every name in your back pocket that you can fit. Does that kind of fit into any kind of final thoughts, or did you have something else that you want to throw out there, Kev?
No, kind of very similar. The last few weeks have all been pretty similar as far as final thoughts, and it's the same. All the little things, right, add up to a big thing. Um, and I think we're down to basically 10 weeks to go. So remember, Rob Silver, uh, approaching July, if not into July, was in last place in his league and won the main event overall championship. It's possible. It's not likely. Now, for the most part,
Sure.
around Memorial Day, our league standings statistically are about what they're going to be at the end of the year. But the people that are putting in the time, putting in the work, are the ones that are going to make those moves. And we do have a precedent from last in his individual league to first in the overall in the second half of the season after the All-Star break is phenomenal. But it shows us it can be done.
There it is. There's always, you look for something to just grab onto and hold on as tight as you possibly can. Um,
Get get inside the top 10 and then get to the top half, then get to
Baby
cashing, and maybe
steps.
there's a couple of
Yep.
weeks left in the
Yep.
season. Yeah.
All right, with that in mind and everything else that we went over, that is going to wrap it up for episode 173 of On the Wire. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is at Hasting Kevin. And of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. After all that, I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hastings. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.